Welcome to the Innovation Flash Demos for BlazeMeter. We'll take this in several steps. First, we'll set the foundation and do Flash Demo number 1. Then we'll move on to Flash Demo number 2. Let's jump right in. Setting the foundation. We'll talk about testing, how it changed from then to now, and how we've gone from long cycle waterfall to short cycle iterations. More detail on that in a minute. We'll talk about why BlazeMeter fits what's needed now. It's a democratized test platform focused on the movement to modern open source tools, and it's modern toolchain friendly. So, digital transformation for the modern software development lifecycle, then versus now. On the left, you see how things used to be. Basically, you had a waterfall with various separate steps, and you had large organizations doing projects over many, many months, and what you ended up with was sort of a very monolithic project structure, independent QA teams, centralized IT functions, and this was a long release cycle that took 18 to 24 months. In the new world, what's happening is you have multiple smaller independent teams, and each of these teams needs to be able to function on its own independently, and that's part of how you get scale. So agile release trains are about having many smaller teams working together, all working at the same time. In order to make that work, each of these teams need to be able to take care of themselves and not wait on any external function coming from a separate group, right? BlazeMeter is a democratized performance test platform. It's focused on open source. It's an enterprise-ready modular platform that's toolchain friendly. That's why it's ready for now. So let's jump into Flash Demo number 1, how BlazeMeter provides a democratized test platform. The key here is there's no need for heavy training or specialists, and you get fast turnaround from curiosity to results. Let's imagine we're a developer and we've just updated the API that lets you do this flight reservation scheme where you're asking for Philadelphia and Berlin and you're clicking find flights. That makes this API call. Now you want to get quick feedback about whether the changes you've made are really making a difference. And you don't know a lot about testing, but you've got access to BlazeMeter. So you come down here and you ask for a URL API test, and you just put in the details of your endpoint. Give it a name, find flights, put in the URL here. I'm just going to steal it from the website itself. And this is a post, which means you're going to send a couple of pieces of data, right? In this case, you're sending the from city, the from port, and the to port. In this case, we're going to Berlin, and that's about it. And we want 100 users here, and we want to ramp this up a little quicker than waiting for 5 minutes, so we're going to do 60 seconds, and we only need to run this for 10 minutes. So we're good to go. We just need to give this a name and call it Quick Test of My Find Flights API. Save it and launch it. This is a real-world scenario. We have developers who don't really want to write a script. They just want to get some feedback right away, and they use the API test. I'll fast forward this a bit, and we'll see what happens. So boom, I start getting feedback right away. This will ramp up to 100 users over the course of a minute, and the developer can see whether the average response time is better or worse than before they made their changes. There's a variety of reports here. The timeline report lets you go into more detail on specific metrics and overlay them on the graph. We'll talk about APM later, but you could overlay APM data on this same graph. Here we're looking at the difference between the average, the minimum, and the maximum for that Find Flights API. It's looking pretty stable. There's detailed metrics here. If they want to look at the 90th percentile or 95th percentile or 99th percentile. Basically statistical ways to slice the responses and make sure you're not missing any information. If there are any errors, you'll be able to see them right here on the errors report. There aren't any here. We can also look and see whether the engines that are running a test themselves are in healthy situation. Obviously, if they're running out of memory or CPU, then you can't really trust your results. And you can easily get to the logs. All of this just from going to the website, typing in a few fields, and running a test. I can put some notes in here. realistically though, let's say what I'm going to put here. I'm going to send this to my boss, right? So my API is going great with the new code. Now I could create an executive summary of this, suitable for sharing or putting out as a PDF. You'll see that the text I put in there is the descriptive summary. I can also change the title of this report, and I could put my own logo in there if I wanted to. Where you see that BlazeMeter logo, I could upload my own logo. Anyway, it's got the high level information. This test isn't complete yet, so the graphs are still drawing, but this report is updated dynamically. You could send it to them now or later. There's also the ability to share this entire interface. So if I want to send all these tabs to someone, I can send this as a read-only report to anyone without having to log in. I'm going to go ahead and post this into Slack. Here's the latest run of the test. Looking great, don't you think? Paste that URL, and then anyone who has access to Slack will be able to see that test. And they'd get something like this. And the only thing that's different is they can't see the logs, they can't download the scripts, but they can see all the results and they can navigate between the different tabs and zoom in on the graphs, etc. It was all pretty easy. But what if I wanted to test a complete workflow with multiple steps? The BlazeMeter Chrome extension lets you record, again, without JMeter skills. I'm just going to give this a name, start the recording, and I'm going to go through the steps. Again, we're going from Philadelphia to Berlin. Hit the Find Flights button, choose one of the flights, and finally put in the information for the purchase. This Chrome extension isn't just for people that don't have JMeter skills. It's also a great way to jumpstart a JMeter recording in order to get into the test faster. Let's go ahead and save this. We're going to stop it, and we can, before we create a JMeter file from this, we can bring up the editor here, and we'll just make the labels more meaningful. Labels are what show up in the reports, right? So we'll just change that URL, which is the current label, into Find Flights. And the second one there, give that a meaningful name as well. Choose Flight. And then finally that last label down there, Purchase Flight, right? Now we just go up and click the JMX button, which will create a JMeter JMX for us. That's the script file that JMeter uses. And now we're ready to quickly get some feedback on how this three-step workflow behaves at scale. So we'll go back to BlazeMeter, we'll create a test, and we're going to use the new streamlined test creation flow that's in beta right now with BlazeMeter. It'll be live in a few weeks. I'm just going to select my JMX that was just created for us, and then just make a couple of changes. We're going to go to 2,000 users instead of 20. Going to ramp up over 5 minutes. Give it 5 steps during the ramp up. Now I want some geographic diversity, so I'm going to click this 4 times, and boom, I've got 5 locations to test from. I could save the test and run it here, but let's look at some other options. We can add failure criteria to mark the test passed or failed automatically. We can add APM data to see what's happening at the back end. We can send data into the APM with a one-way integration, or bring the data back into the BlazeMeter graphs with two-way integration. I can emulate a mobile network in order to see what the restraints of a 3G connection are going to have on the ability to get these transactions done. Let's go ahead and give it a name, and we'll run it. So our goal was to get fast feedback and understand how this would behave with 2,000 users. And here we can see, as it ramped up, things definitely took longer and there were errors. So we know that we've got issues when scaling up to a reasonable amount of load here. In addition to democratizing access, a big goal is to be able to shift left and do testing out in the developer teams. So we want to be developer friendly. We want to create and maintain test as code, be able to diff and merge, put things in source code control. We also want to be able to leverage the developer's natural interest in open source tools, JMeter, Gatling, Selenium, etc. And finally, we want to be able to play well in modern tool chains. We want to be able to use with pieces from multiple vendors. We want to be able to use with pieces from open source and in-house frameworks. Let's go back to that Chrome extension recording we did earlier and see how we can actually create a developer-friendly version of this by choosing the Torus option. Torus will generate a human-readable YAML file. Let's take a look at it. So this is really pretty self-evident if you're paying attention. There's a scenario, it's got concurrency, a ramp up, a time that it's held for, and then there's some details which a developer would find familiar. there's various HTTP requests, there's bodies to the posts, all the stuff they expect. They can run this right from the command line. So here I'm at my command line in my terminal, and I'm running Taurus. This lets me run right on my desktop to get feedback right away, either from the code running on my desktop or perhaps a nearby server. They see the important stuff. How many users are there running, how many hits are happening, what the average response time is. They even get some percentiles to be able to look at the variability between the requests. And on the right there, they can actually see whether the system that the test is running on is using too much CPU or RAM. So that's running fine at lower volume on my desktop. Now I want to run it in something bigger. So I'll use the cloud resources, whether that's private cloud, the public cloud, or a private location within my firewall. Dash Cloud gets it done for me, and now I'm seeing the results on my desktop in that same interface, but I've also got it running in the BlazeMeter cloud and can look at the rich reports there if I want. Here's what happened when I ran with 800 users, and obviously I've got a little more detail in these graphs. I can drill in and I can look at the differences between the steps, the choose flight, the find flights, the purchase flight steps, and see how they varied. Now let's see how easy it is to automate all of this. Here I'm in Jenkins, and the first example I'm going to use here is actually a use case that could be done with any automation tool. Let's drill in and have a look at how this is configured. First of all, it's being triggered when a commit is made to GitHub. And as we scroll down, we'll see the connection to GitHub. We'll see this done every 5 minutes to check to see if there's changes. But then we'll see this, the build step. This is just an execute shell. This is a command line that could be run from any tool, not just Jenkins. We're just running BlazeMeter Taurus here. In a minute, we'll see a more specific to Jenkins example. But let's build this. Let's actually tell this to run. And if we look at the console output, we can see what's sort of happening behind the scenes. The test has been launched. It's running. It's checking to see what the statistics are. And at the same time, it's posting the results into BlazeMeter, and we can see trends here, and we can drill in on specific tests. Let's look at the one we just kicked off. So we already know how we can drill into this detail and see the trends. Let's look at another example, though, and that's using something called the Performance plugin, which is a long-standing plugin that's existed in Jenkins for years before BlazeMeter came along. We've managed to actually co-opt this plugin and enhance it, which makes us popular amongst the open source community. But we've also done something kind of special, which is that we've built Taurus directly into the plugin itself. If you choose Run Performance Test here, you're actually running Taurus, and you're just giving the rest of the command line arguments you would have given after the BZT. The graphs show the trends at a high level within Jenkins, but you're going to want more data, and that's why, of course, you're going to come back to BlazeMeter. We also have plugins for Bamboo and for TeamCity. So we've got out-of-the-box plugins for other continuous integration servers. We also provide support, of course, for Continuous Delivery Director, CDD SaaS, right? So there's a BlazeMeter plugin for that. And when you do that, you can actually add JMeter, any kind of BlazeMeter test, in fact, into your pipeline. Now, let's take a quick look and look at other tools besides JMeter. Here I'm going to take a Scala file, which is what Gatling uses. I'm just going to drop it into the new interface. And right away, BlazeMeter says, yep, that's a Gatling test. No problem. I got your back. I can get this run for you. You can see the other test types that we're all rolling out with this interface as well. So BlazeMeter is much more than just JMeter. It's very aligned with open source. Let's take a look at the open source platforms that Taurus supports to get an idea of all the stuff we're doing here. So you'll see some things you recognize probably, obviously JMeter, Selenium, JUnit, TestNG, NUnit. The list keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and this is where we're going. So touching again on what we covered in the second demo, BlazeMeter is developer friendly, it leverages the developer's interest in open source tools, and it plays well in modern tool chains.